End them all! No Katagun must escape! A man's voice rang out. Smoke filled the air all around him as the sounds of clashing swords and painful screams echoed through the battlefield. In a hidden place, a young boy hugged his mother tightly. His face was filled with fear as he cried, "Don't be afraid, Tade. Mother is here," the woman said as she carried the child and walked on silently. "Who's that?" A voice suddenly shouted from behind, and the woman's eyes widened in fear. She immediately started running towards a bush in the distance. Many years earlier, the kingdom of Wukari was peaceful and prosperous. Its large rivers watered vast fertile lands, and the people reaped bountiful harvests. Its markets were large, as people came from all over the land of Wukari for whatever they needed. The king of Wukari was a great ruler, and the kingdom prospered under him. He had many wives, but only one son, Prince Galadima. Prince Galadima was a capable young man, a skilled warrior, and an honest and kind man. The king loved him, and everyone knew he was going to become a great king after his father. The chiefs, however, disliked the prince. He was too honest and had spoken against their corruption in the kingdom. As a prince, he still had no power, and his mother was also a woman from an ordinary family. But once he became king, the nobles knew he would become a problem for them. But in the king's old age, when everyone least expected it, another wife of the king gave birth to another son, Mustef. Mustef's mother was from one of the noble houses of the kingdom of Wukari. In fact, her uncle was the army general of Wukari kingdom. The chiefs immediately started persuading the king to name the younger prince as his successor. The king, however, knew their intentions. They did not want Galadima because he was an honest man. Mustef, however, was a young boy who could easily be manipulated. On his deathbed, the king named Galadima as his successor. The people of the land rejoiced at this, but the chiefs were not happy. When the king died, they all supported the army general who led a rebellion against Prince Galadima. One noble house, however, remained loyal to the prince, the Katagun family. The Katagun family was an ancient family descended from a man who had guarded the first king of Wukari. The royal family had always been protected by the Kataguns, and Tade's grandfather was currently the head of the royal guards as well as the head of the family. When the head of the Katagun family heard the king's decision to make Prince Galadima his heir, he ordered his son, Timi, to begin protecting the prince. The army general and other noble houses did not try to persuade the head of the Katagun family to betray the prince. They knew the Katagun family was always stubborn and loyal unto death. The warriors of Wukari attacked the palace and the house of the Katagun family on the same day. They killed Prince Galadima and all the royal guards. Then they attacked the Katagun family. Warriors surged into the large household. The men of the Katagun family were not weak. They drew their swords and fought until their last breaths to defend their heritage. But they were up against thousands of warriors. Men, women, boys and girls were struck down as long as they were Kataguns, and the young boy watched everything from a window in his room. "Tade!" A young boy suddenly heard his mother's voice from behind, and he turned back with tears streaming down his face. "Don't be scared, Tade. Just keep silent and do whatever mother says," the woman said before leading the boy silently out of the room. Outside, everywhere was filled with smoke and fire. The woman looked around before leading the boy into a narrow path behind the house. "Who is that?" a voice suddenly shouted from behind, and the woman's eyes widened in fear. She immediately started running towards a bush in the distance. The man, however, chased after them and grabbed the woman from behind, pushing her aside as she fell with the child in her arms.
Run, Tade!
The woman shouted as she quickly stood up in front of the boy, who burst into tears. He could not imagine leaving his mother.
The last son of Katagun,
the man said with a grind, before dashing forward and pushing the woman aside.
Don't you dare touch my son!
The woman shouted as she drew a dagger and stabbed the man in the chest. The man screamed in pain as he staggered back.
Run, Tade! Remember, you promised to listen to mother. Now run!
The woman shouted. With tears in his eyes, the child turned back and ran into the forest, into the distance, while several other guards arrived, and the woman fought them with great skill. Suddenly, the man returned and stabbed her through the back before ordering the warriors to find the boy. They, however, could not find him. The words of his mother echoed in Tade's head as he ran for hours until his legs could no longer carry him. He fainted in the forest, but a man had been watching from a distance. He was Ilian, one of Tade's father's friends, and he was greatly saddened by the destruction of the only noble family that cared about the people of the kingdom of Wukari. The Katagun family was loved for always fighting for common people who had been wronged by nobles. He remembered when Wukari kingdom was at war with the neighboring kingdom. The third son of the house of Katagun, Timi, was tasked with protecting Wukari merchants who were being ambushed, and Ilian was one of them. As payment for their work, the merchants gave part of their goods to the warriors, but soon the warriors became greedy and demanded more than half of the merchants' goods. Ilian went to see Timi, who immediately stood against the warriors for the sake of the merchants.
How will they make profit?
He argued. When the case was brought before the king, he was surprised that a noble would fight for ordinary people. But when he realized he was from the Katagun family, the king understood. Eventually, the king ordered the warriors to reduce their demands. All this made the other noble families despise the Katagun family. The people, however, loved them, as Ilian was only one of the countless people whose lives their good deeds had touched. Now that the Katagun family was gone, Ilian could not imagine how much the oppression in the land would increase. With a heavy heart, he followed Tade's tracks into the forest and took him away from the city. Then, he placed the child under the apprenticeship of a blacksmith called Kolu in a far-away town at the borders of Wukari.
Who is this boy? Did you father an illegitimate child?
Kolu asked as he looked at the little boy suspiciously.
He is an orphan. Just teach him your trade and stop asking questions.
Ilian replied, and the man nodded before taking the child. Ilian gave Kolu as much as he could offer for Tade's upkeep. Years passed as the little king Mustaf ruled. Under him, the nobles acted with power and cruelty. No one dared to speak back to them. The king, to whom they could cry for help, was still little and only did what his mother told him. As King Mustaf grew older and started to make decisions for himself, people hoped he would be a just and merciful king. But to the horror of the people of Wukari, he was even more cruel than the nobles. He took people's lives for the slightest reasons. The people soon began to whisper about how the Kataguns had always stood up for them against the other nobles. But now, the Kataguns were gone, and they had no defender. While all this happened, Tade grew up in a town far away from the royal capital. At first, Kolu fed Tade very well, but as the boy grew into a young man, he proved strong, and Kolu began to use him to make free money. He would send the boy to work as a laborer on other people's farms, or send him to help adults build houses. Then, he would collect all the money. Kolu eventually stopped teaching Tade anything, as he simply sent the boy off to work every day like a servant. One day, Tade sat with his fellow laborers in a large field. The field was filled with ripe maize, which they were harvesting under the hot afternoon sun. And now, it was finally time to rest and eat. They all sat under a shed eating maize and smoked game that they had caught on the farm. Tade lay on a wooden bench eating his food calmly, while the others ate with the anxiousness of wanting to finish quickly. This was because their employer was a cruel man. None of them were surprised since he was a noble, and all nobles were cruel. He will not even let them eat before coming to rush them back to work. Soon, the man came with a whip in his hand, cursing at them, and everyone frowned. They had been working from very early in the morning until noon. Now, the man will not even let them eat and rest for a few minutes before rushing them back to work.
I said, get back to work!
The man shouted, waving his whip, and the laborers hurriedly stood up as they rushed back to work. One person, however, remained behind, still eating calmly as he could not hear what the man was saying.
Tade! Tade! Tade!
Different voices called his name as the man walked towards him. Tade knew everything that was happening around him, but he had had enough. He could no longer walk from morning till afternoon and still not be allowed some time to rest. He knew the boss would be furious, but he did not care. The worst that could happen was that his daily wage would not be paid. He did not care about that, since Kolu was the one being paid anyway. The man was soon by Tade's side as he spoke.
Since you are deaf, let us see if you don't feel pain too.
He said this before swinging his whip towards Tade's head, but Tade rolled off the bench before picking it up and slamming it into the man's head. Everyone was shocked.
Tade, what are you doing?
Don't be unreasonable. Different voices came from every corner of the shed in fear. They wondered if Tade knew the man was a noble. Tade did. He just did not care.
How dare you?
One of the man's escorts shouted as he swung a rod at him, but Tade delivered a heavy punch to the man's chin, causing him to stagger back. Guards immediately rushed to the scene, surrounded Tade and started beating him. He eventually managed to run out of the farm. Sometime later, he reached a blacksmith workshop where a man was repeatedly striking a piece of iron with his hammer. On seeing the boy, however, he dropped his hammer and stared at him, asking why he had returned so early. I beat up the noble and escaped back home.
You did what?
The man shouted with wide eyes.
Go back and beg him now, or I will not bat an eye when he comes for your head.
Tade simply ignored him as he walked into the house, while the man continued shouting and cursing at him from outside. 8 years had passed since he lost everything. What if life had gone as it should? Maybe he would be somewhere in the palace now, protecting the life of a future king. But it hadn't, and now he was stuck with a greedy man who would rather use him as a servant than let him do what he truly wanted to do. It was even more annoying that Kolu only ate, drank, and gambled with his money. Still, this was not the reason Tade had fought. He at least owed Kolu a lot for raising him. He just could not stand injustice whenever he saw it. That was why he had fought with the noble. Suddenly, he heard footsteps entering the house, and he turned to see Ilian, the man who had brought him to Kolu and who always came to check on him. Welcome, sir, he greeted, prostrating on the floor, and the man nodded, urging him to stand.
I wanted to ask how you were doing.
But you don't look so well, boy, Ilian said, looking at him before turning towards Kolu with a questioning look. Kolu was speechless. Unless he would have known Ilian was coming and he would have let Tade rest. He had not expected Ilian to come without sending a message in advance.
You think I wouldn't know, Kolu?
Ilian said angrily. Whenever Ilian visited Kolu, he always gave him a large amount of money to take care of the boy. During his last visit, he had actually asked around about Tade, and people said Kolu used him like a servant, but he did not believe them
and instead sent someone to spy on him. He gave Kolu more than enough to take care of the boy for another year, and to his surprise, his spies still reported that Kolu continued to use Tade as a servant.
So you've actually been given everything you need to take care of me. Then why do you make it look like I am a burden to you?
Tade said, glaring at Kolu in anger. Then he turned towards Ilian.
I have always been indebted to you for saving my life, Master Ilian. Please take me along with you. I will serve you however I can,
Tade said. Ilian sighed before nodding.
It is actually high time you started becoming independent, Tade.
Tade had lived in Kolu's house for 8 years, and now he was 18 years old. These 8 years had been spent learning blacksmithing and also learning to do whatever it took to survive. Indeed, he was now ready to live independently. Even though Kolu had turned out to be a greedy man, he was still the person who had raised Tade and protected him for many years. Tade felt emotional about leaving him, and he prostrated before the man.
Take care, Tade,
the man said. Then the boy packed his belongings and followed Ilian as they journeyed to another city. Kolu sat in his house as he realized the boy who had made him a lot of free money was gone. He not only collected a lot of money from Ilian, but he also sent Tade to work for people and collected all the money. Now, however, he would have to start living like an ordinary blacksmith. Instead of sadness, however, he started laughing. From the time the boy had been brought to him, he had been suspicious of his identity. The child had been brought to him at the same time the last son of the Katagun family was declared wanted by the general of Wukari's army. He had asked the boy a lot of questions while he was still young, and Tade had revealed many things. He had discovered who the boy was a long time ago. Now, he only needed to reveal his identity to the general, and he will make a lot of money from it. He quickly sent a spy to watch Ilian and Tade as they left. Then, he sent a message to the noble in the royal city. He had found the last surviving son of the Katagun family. Without any knowledge of Kolu's betrayal, Tade and Ilian traveled at the front of a large company. Many people rode on horses and camels behind them, and almost all of them were Ilian's servants or hired workers. Only now did Tade realize how wealthy Ilian really was.
When we reach our destination, I will give you a house and some money to sustain yourself. What you do with your life from then onward will be up to you. I think you have done enough in your father's memory, Ilian said. But I can work for you, Tade replied. Ilian refused, stating that Tade carried the legacy of a great family. He should never be content with working as a servant for anyone. Tade nodded as he thanked the man. He was not sure whether he could ever repay even half of the help Ilian had rendered him, but he had vowed that even if helping Ilian required sacrificing his own life, he would do it. At night, the company stopped to rest as they set up tents. Suddenly, several warriors on horseback appeared from every direction. Warriors of Wukari, how did they know?
Ilian exclaimed as he jumped onto a horse and shouted to Tade.
Escape, boy! They are here for you!
Tade frowned. Then he walked towards the riders and said,
Don't hurt anyone. I'm the one you are looking for.
The riders stopped, glancing at each other for a moment before one of them jumped down and walked towards him. Ilian screamed at Tade to back away, but Tade held out his hands as the warriors bound them. Then the one who had bound him spoke.
Capture everyone!
Tade's eyes widened as he watched the warriors overwhelm everyone. He screamed in anger as Ilian was also captured, and soon all of them were dragged away. Several hours later, they reached a large building where Tade saw a familiar face standing at the entrance.
Kolu, you crook!
Ilian shouted as he glared at the man standing in the middle of the doorway.
Kolu smiled before entering the house as the warriors dragged both Tade and Ilian after him. Inside, Tade froze as he saw Kolu standing beside another familiar face. He looked much older now, but Tade could never forget that face, the man who had taken his mother's life. Kolu, what's the meaning of this? Why are you doing this to us? Ilian shouted angrily. Ilian, calm down. I'm only doing business here. No hard feelings, Kolu said before looking at Tade with a smile. You sold me out to him, Tade said, feeling a mixture of pain and anger. When he first began living with Kolu, he had actually trusted the man. Kolu had treated him like a son, but now he could no longer see the man he had known many years ago. Kolu had now joined the list of people Tade must destroy before he died. You both left me with no way to make free money. And you think I'm the bad person here? Kolu said before turning to the man by his side. It is left to you, Sotoni. With that, he walked away. Tade gave Sotoni a look of hatred and anger. He remembered the man who had chased him and his mother as he tried to take him to safety. Rage filled his mind as he struggled to break free from his bonds, but they were made of iron and he could not break them. Sotoni looked at Ilian before shaking his head and accusing him of betraying the king. Ilian replied that the nobles were the ones who had betrayed their king, as they had taken the life of their rightful king and placed a cruel man on the throne. Ilian came from a poor background, but had built up his trade and eventually became one of the leading merchants in the kingdom. The nobles did not like him, but they could not openly destroy him because the people were already angry with them. Now that he had hidden the king's enemy, however, they had finally found something for which he could be punished. You took my mother's life and destroyed my family. As long as I live, I will have my revenge, Tade said angrily. Well, I must first bring you to the king alive. But don't worry, you will soon join your mother, Sotoni said with a smile. He could still remember the shame and scars the Kataguns had left him with after he destroyed their home. He had been wounded by Tade's mother and had only narrowly escaped death after being treated for several days. Everyone had also mocked him for being unable to catch Tade. Now, however, he would finally bring Tade to the king alive and redeem his name and honor. Sotoni ordered his men to tie Tade's and Ilian's hands to their horses, and then they began the journey back to the kingdom of Wukari. They traveled for several days, being pulled by the horses. Throughout most of the journey, the horses dragged their bodies across the rough ground. Their limbs trembled with pain and exhaustion, but both endured it. Fortunately, Sotoni fed them 3 times a day and rested through the night, so they at least had enough strength to keep running. Eventually, they reached the gates of Wukari city, and the guards bowed to Sotoni while looking at the 2 prisoners behind them with curious expressions. Sotoni had announced throughout the kingdom that he had found the last son of the Katagun family and the traitor who had hidden him, and the whole city had gathered to see them. On their way to the palace, they reached to the market square where the people were most concentrated. Sotoni immediately ordered his warriors to stop. Then, he walked towards Tade, pushed him forward and shouted, People of Wukari, behold these betrayers. Tade Katagun, the last son of the Katagun family, the enemy of the king and his kingdom. After this, he pushed Ilian forward as well and shouted, Ilian, he hid the enemy of the kingdom. He protected this boy for years, thinking he would never be caught. But nothing escapes the vision of Lord Sotoni. Now, good people of Wukari, what do these rebels deserve? He asked, expecting a response, but what he got was silence.
The people looked at them with rage burning in their hearts. They were all tired of the oppression of the king and the nobles. Now, they were seeing the son of the Katagun family, the only family that had fought for the common people, alive and on the verge of being extinguished. It filled them with sadness and anger.
He calls me a rebel. But why wouldn't I save a Katagun when his family was the only noble family that had ever fought for us?
Ilian shouted. So Thoni grabbed him by the neck and yelled,
"Shut up!" He wants me to shut up. They want us to shut up. But if there is even a single Katagun alive, we, the people of Wukari, still have the right to speak. He's right!
Someone suddenly shouted from the crowd.
We won't be treated like dogs. We won't be treated like rags. Shut up!
So Thoni roared at the crowd as he drew his sword and severed Ilian's head from his body. He expected fear, but what Sothoni unleashed instead was years of suppressed rage.
You murderer! How dare you sever his head? Don't touch the son of Katagun!
Several voices screamed as they rushed towards Sothoni. Chaos erupted immediately, and the smile on Sothoni's face turned into fear. He had thought the common people were always docile and foolish. He believed they would be terrified once he took one of their lives, but now he realized these people had minds of their own.
Run, everyone! Escape!
He shouted to his men. They immediately mounted their horses and began to flee. Tade was thrown to the ground as people rushed and trampled over him from every direction, and he eventually fainted. Someone, however, grabbed him and disappeared into the crowd. Some moments later, the palace guards rushed into the market square and started attacking the people, but they could not find Tade. Tade woke to find himself in a strange room. He slowly sat up on the bed and looked around. Some time later, a beautiful young girl entered the room and looked at him in amazement. Her face looked familiar to him, but he could not remember who she was.
You are awake. Oh, thank the gods. Let me inform Baba,
she said as she turned to leave.
Wait, where am I? Where is Ilian?
Tade asked. Suddenly, the memories came rushing back as he remembered what had happened in the market square. Ilian was no longer alive. Tade lowered his head in pain as tears flowed from his eyes. The girl stared at him for a moment before walking out, and soon she returned with an old man. The old man told him that the girl had brought him to his house. Tade stared at the young woman for a moment before thanking her. Then he stood to leave, but the old man asked him to stay. Tade replied that he was the enemy of the king and did not want to bring trouble upon them with his presence.
You are not in more trouble than I am, Tade. After all, I am Sherima, the daughter of Prince Galadima.
The young woman said, and Tade's eyes widened. Now, he realized why the girl had seemed familiar. When he was young, he would usually visit the palace with his father, and he had seen the little princess a couple of times. He sat back down and asked how the princess had managed to remain hidden in the kingdom for so long. The princess explained that she had been saved by the old man, who was the royal healer. He had taken her into the forest, and since then, they had been living there together. Tade revealed to them that he planned to destroy the general and the king of Wukari.
Young man, you possess something extraordinary within you. Everyone knows not to go against the king, yet Ilian risked his life to save you. The moment you stepped into the city, the people immediately found the courage to stand against the noble. I think you are the one we need. But are you ready to die?
The old man asked.
I am,
Tade replied with a chuckle.
Great. A man who is ready to fight to the last drop of blood is exactly what Wukari needs.
The old man said.
There are many people in Wukari who are angry with the king. They are secretly loyal to Sherima, but they need a leader. Will you lead them?
Tade stared at him for a moment before replying, "As long as they will listen to my orders, and my orders alone." The old man nodded, and that night, Tade was led to a clearing in the middle of the forest. There, he met hundreds of people who were ready to fight King Mustaf to the very end. Most of them were Galadima's allies, who, along with their families, had been declared wanted by the king for years. Others were merchants and traders who had been cheated or reduced to poverty by the nobles' corrupt practices. "The son of Katagun?" He was greeted with a thunderous roar as he stepped into the middle of the gathering. He addressed them and told them of his goal to wrest the throne of the kingdom of Wukari from the hands of Mustaf and give it to the rightful heir. The people rejoiced. They told him of the great deeds of the Kataguns, how the people of the kingdom had come to realize the cost of their absence, and how ready they were to follow him, a Katagun. They also told him that their families were in danger as they were being searched for throughout the kingdom. The king was threatening to take the lives of their family members if they did not come out of hiding. Tade assured them that the preparations for taking over the kingdom were already in place and that their families would be safe. The next day, Tade sneaked into the town. King Mustaf had learned of everything, and he was furious that Sultani had let Tade escape again. The king accused him of bringing a stranger into his kingdom and causing unrest that was destabilizing his reign. The king sent many warriors into the town as they grabbed random men and women to the street. They accused them of attacking a noble, and hundreds of people were locked in the dungeons. Then, the king declared that they will all be executed. He also sentenced Sultani, his mother's cousin, to death despite the fact that his mother begged him not to. The old general begged for his son's life, but King Mustaf was no longer the little king who could be controlled. He ordered that Sultani be executed, and all of the other noble families supported him. The army general could not bear to watch his only son be executed, so he took his own life before it could happen. Hidden in a cloak, Tade watched the gruesome death of hundreds of innocent men and women. Many sorrowful cries rang out in the city as people lost their beloved ones, but the king only laughed before warning them that anyone who attempted to rebel would suffer the same fate. In anger, Tade returned to the forest as the plan to destroy King Mustaf and the nobles continued. They devised a plan by which they would be able to enter the palace while the king and all the chiefs were gathered there. Only then could they strike and destroy the king. King Mustaf sat on his throne with a regretful expression. His mother had refused to speak to him since he executed her cousin and caused her to lose her uncle as well. "Did I do a bad thing by executing that Sultani, who only brought shame upon my mother's family and the kingdom?" he asked, looking at the chiefs gathered around him, but no one answered. "You are not answering. So you think I did something wrong?" he asked, glaring angrily at one of the chiefs. No, not at all, my lord. What you did was for the best," the chief, who was being stared at, quickly replied as he gulped. He did not want to incur the wrath of the young, unreasonable king. Suddenly, a messenger walked into the palace and delivered a message to the king. A wealthy merchant from a faraway land wished to bring her wares to the kingdom of Wukari, but first, she wanted to present a gift to the king before conducting any business. The king smiled upon hearing this. It was the first good news he had received in a long while, and he immediately granted the merchant permission to enter Wukari. On the appointed day, hundreds of horses and camels entered the city of Wukari. They carried many colorful boxes filled with cloth. Some contained beads, while others were filled with colorful bangles, earrings, and many other valuable items. The whole city gathered to watch them. Leading the caravan was a beautiful young woman who waved at everyone around her as the guards escorted her towards the palace. It was Sherima, the hidden daughter of Prince Galadima, but no one knew her face. Behind her robe, several veiled figures on horseback, and soon they reached the palace gates. The palace guards questioned why the people behind her had veils covering their faces, but the woman replied that they were desert dwellers and that this was how they dressed to protect themselves from the dust of the desert. The guards were suspicious as they walked among the veiled men, before one suddenly opened his face. It was Tade.
"Don't be afraid, we are human like you,"
he spoke, and the guard stared at him for a moment before nodding. Tade sighed in relief as he closed his face. Many of the townspeople had seen him in the market, but the guards inspecting them were royal guards, so he hoped they didn't know his face. Fortunately, they didn't. The boxes containing beautiful cloths were then thoroughly checked before they were allowed to move on. Sherima was eventually allowed into the palace alone.
"My lord, I am a merchant from the north. I have visited many kings and cities, but the beauty of your land surpasses them all. I am honored to be allowed into your presence,"
the woman said with a bow.
"Welcome, merchant,"
the king said, standing as he walked towards the woman.
"I am honestly surprised. I didn't know that visiting merchants will be a woman." "Well, I intended to surprise you, my lord," the woman replied. "Well, I am surprised. Have we by any chance met somewhere before?" the king asked. "We never have, your majesty. I would surely have remembered meeting a person of your status," the merchant said, bowing again. "Is that true? Bring in the gifts then. Let me see them," the king said.
Soon, 3 veiled men walked into the hall. They carried 3 boxes with them and placed them on the floor in front of the king. Several murmurs rang out in the palace as everyone realized the boxes brought actually contained the most cloths and beads amongst everything the merchants had brought into the city.
"I hope these are not your gifts to me," the king suddenly said, and the whole hall went silent. "Each of the nobles here wears things even more beautiful than this. Do you think I am poor?" the king asked.
The woman smiled.
"I do not think you are poor, my lord, and my gift to you is not all of this. My gift to you is justice."
The moment the woman finished speaking, the veiled men swept the items off the boxes, revealing gleaming swords hidden underneath. There was no way they could have walked close to the king while carrying weapons openly. So, they deceived the king into believing they had come to present him with gifts. When the guards inspected their goods, they had inspected only the most beautiful boxes and left the others. These were the ones that hid the weapons. The first man raised the sword towards the young king's head before he could react, as the king trembled in place. The eyes of the guards standing all around widened in shock, but they knew their king would immediately die if they made any move to attack.
"You have been looking for me, I believe,"
Tade said as he removed the veil on his face and smiled at the trembling king. The king was just as old as him, and Tade could not understand why he had grown so evil.
"Who are you? What do you want? Just tell me. I'll give you anything."
The king spoke with a terrified expression.
"I am Tade, son of Timi. I am a Katagun,"
Tade declared, and the king's eyes widened. All the nobles began to tremble in fear as they screamed to the guards to attack.
"Don't attack! Don't attack, or you will take my life!"
The young king screamed with a tearful face, and Tade chuckled. Then, he moved back and spoke.
"Pick up a sword and let's fight like men."
The king was, however, too afraid, as he immediately turned back and tried to run away.
pitiful,"
Tade said as he severed the king's head from behind, and a violent battle began in the palace.
"Your end has come,"
Sherima screamed as she grabbed a weapon from one of the boxes and charged towards the nobles. The guards tried to stop her, but all the veiled men outside had already rushed into the palace, and the nobles were swiftly struck down. News immediately spread throughout the kingdom that the son of Katagun had returned. He had destroyed the king along with all the nobles and had brought justice to the land. All the people of Wukari rejoiced as they rushed towards the palace, shouting that Tade, the son of Katagun, should immediately take the throne. Tade walked out to face the people of the kingdom and spoke. "My father was not the king, but he sacrificed his life to protect Prince Galadima, who was the rightful king." He then turned to Sherima, who stood beside him looking at the people. "This is Princess Sherima, the daughter of Galadima and the rightful ruler to the kingdom of Wukari. She is your queen." Silence descended upon the gathering. The people of Wukari had never been ruled by a woman.
"The son of Katagun has spoken. His words is justice. We will accept Queen Sherima, the daughter of Prince Galadima, as our ruler."
The crowd immediately erupted in joy, and Sherima became queen. Tade restored his family's place as the protectors of the rulers of Wukari. Tade went on to look for Elian's family, gave them everything their father had lost, and mourned with them. Then he searched for Kolu as well and took everything he owned. He left only enough to let him live as a blacksmith.